Whenever you're ready.
Hello everyone, my name is Carla Ferzoco. Thank you all for coming to my senior project presentation. So for my senior project, my goal was to answer the question of how can I educate the Mills High School student athletes on proper nutrition in order to ensure that they're performing their best at practices and games. So just an outline of what I'm going to cover in this presentation is my research, why I chose this project, my mentor, formation of my presentation, creating and providing snacks for the audience, my final product, the senior project day that I participated in, and my successes and failures. So why I chose this project. I chose this project because it's something that I'm very passionate about as a high-level athlete, and making nutrition a priority has made a huge impact on my athletic performance. And I also wanted to debunk misconceptions because they can actually be very dangerous if they're not corrected at a young age. And lastly, I wanted to inspire young athletes to take nutrition seriously because it is something that is kind of ignored in today's world, and it's especially important that they start thinking about it now at a young age so it builds healthy habits going forward in their future. So why this project was good for me specifically, I do have a little bit of an athletic background myself. I started gymnastics at 3 years old, and I started competing at 6, and I've done so ever since. I practice 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, so prioritizing fueling with the limited time that I have outside of the gym was just super important for me. And I began taking nutrition seriously mainly during quarantine when we weren't allowed in the gym. And since being back, I have noticed significant change in my training, so I wanted to share this knowledge with hopes that the performance of the Mills athletes will also increase. So my mentor was Mr. Kendrick. He has taken many classes on nutrition through Cornell University, so I thought he would be perfect for my mentor. And though they were mainly focused on a plant-based diet, he also has great knowledge on fueling with athletics. And he did a great job just making sure I was on top of my project the whole time. And he was always available if I had any questions, and he was very quick responding to emails, so overall I just had a really great experience working with him. And these are just some of the emails that we had sent back and forth. So some of the main topics I covered in my presentation were how poor nutrition affects performance, fueling performance versus fueling to enhance performance, common mistakes, and proper pre, intra, and post-workout fuel. In doing research, I found multiple reliable sources in each of these topics to ensure that the information I was sharing to the public was trustworthy and true. And throughout this year, I completed the research that was necessary to educate the students. I started by planning out possible topics to cover, and once I had like a master list of like just a bunch of brainstorm ideas, I narrowed them down to topics that I wanted to ensure that I covered in my presentation, just to make sure I was getting to the most important and reliable information in a brief way that they could remember. And along with completing my research through the research reports, I also had to research outside of the essays, and this was the most essential step for me because I was not able to complete enough research just through the research reports alone. And so as the date of my presentation got closer, it was time for me to organize my research into the essential topics. At this time, I chose what specific details I wanted to cover in my presentation, and as I mentioned before, the main topics I chose in the end were how poor nutrition affects performance negatively, fueling performance versus fueling to enhance performance, common mistakes, and proper workout fuel. Along with the research, I felt that it was important that I included one of my favorite recipes, along with samples and a Kahoot, just to make the presentation more interactive and entertaining for the audience. And so next I'm going to talk a little bit about the senior project day that I participated in. The day that my project took place on was the day of senior project organized by DeLacy. And I thought this was a great idea, and it was a really good way to show off all the hard work that the seniors put into their projects throughout the year if they did choose to be a part of this project. And so to start, I got in touch with DeLacy just to reserve a spot and a room in his schedule for that day. And I then worked with him to create this flyer for the outside of the room so that students knew where to be on the day of the presentation. And I think overall the senior project day is something that would be very beneficial to keep going forward, just because it played such a large role in my project, and it made it very accessible for people to sign up for it during school hours. So in preparation for my presentation, I created one of my favorite pre-workout snacks, which is peanut butter energy balls. I gathered all of the ingredients that were necessary to make them, and I had help from some friends. So we made over 200 samples just to ensure that I had more than enough for everyone who came to watch. And I chose this snack specifically because there's something quick and easy to grab for athletes, and they're just very easy to make for snack prep for a week. And there's just a quick source of all the macronutrients that your body needs to get you through a workout. So when it came to the day of my presentation, I presented a total of 4 times. Each of the 4 grades signed up for a 20-minute session. I presented to the audience and then continued with a food to see what they had learned. I included 15 questions related to the topics that I covered in the presentation. And to finish things off, I provided the audience with examples of the energy balls. Some of my successes, even though there were only technically supposed to be 20 people at each of my presentations, there was well over that in all 4 of them, which made me very happy because it meant that the people watching were truly interested in the topic and they really wanted to be there, obviously. And after my presentation was over, I received great feedback from multiple students and teachers about the presentation itself and my presenting skills as a whole. And finally, I felt very prepared to give this presentation, and I really felt like I knew and understood each of the topics that I covered. So I was very comfortable when I was presenting. And so my failures and obstacles were more towards the beginning of my project and more during the brainstorming process, because I did have a different vision of what my project would be in the beginning. Originally, my plan was to hold a fueling station before practices and games for athletes, where they could grab something to give them a boost of energy throughout their training. This would require me to be there every day for extended periods of time, and there was no way that I could ensure that would happen. And proper nutrition is really only beneficial if it becomes a healthy habit. So I thought just giving the presentation to inform the athletes was a good stepping stone towards having something like this in the near future. And I also feel like if I had more time to present my project, I could have researched more topics to help the audience have just a better grasp on the content I was covering. I also had some technical difficulties during my first session, resulting in me not having enough time to finish my presentation or get to the Kahoot, but they did still get their snacks, so it was okay. And lastly, though there was a teacher in the room who took a few pictures, I was not able to receive those to include in this. And I also just wish I took more pictures of my presentation overall, just so I could include them in this final presentation. What I got out of my project, I was able to further my education in this subject area, thus helping my performance while also providing the students with knowledge to help them with their performance. And like I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of positive feedback on my presentation and the information that I included, which sparked interest from the viewers. And in the time I saved for questions during my presentation, there was a large number of people who participated. So that just showed me that they were really interested in what I was talking about. So how my project connects to the core values and beliefs. The main way it connects to the core values and beliefs is through the last statement. It states that we strive to empower students as they become self-directed, respectful, responsible, and civic-minded individuals. My project connects to this statement because it was meant to inspire athletes to take nutrition seriously and prioritize it as they do become more self-directed, going forward with their sport or just into life in general. My thank yous. To finish off, I wanted to thank, obviously, DeLacy for organizing the Senior Project Day, where my project and many others were able to take place. Without this day, I probably would not have had such a large number of viewers at my presentation, being that it probably would have had to happen after school. And I also wanted to thank my mentor, Mr. Kendrick, for answering any questions that I had along the way, and for providing me with reliable sources of information to educate the students on athletic nutrition. This is not excited.